Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Jodi Krangle on the line, and she's a voiceover actor at Piece of Cake Voiceovers and Vocals, and she's also host of the Audio Branding Podcast. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right, Jodi. So I'm excited to have you on the show today to talk about really what companies need to do to find the hidden gem of marketing. And I know I have my biases, and people that have been listening to this for a long time, this show, they know what I think. But I'm excited to have a fellow podcaster on today to talk about the power really of voice. But before we do that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Jodi, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Jodi, what mission matters to you?
Well, it's kind of the reason I started the podcast in the first place. I am really wanting to raise all boats for those of us that work in sound, because for a really long time, it's been the afterthought of just about every production out there. And it really shouldn't, because that's what gives us our emotional context. It's what tells us how we should react to things. So it's really super important, and I don't think people give it its due.
Oh, I love it, and love having mission-based individuals on here who are really carrying the flag for their mission, which in your case it's voice and sound. So love it. So just to dive right into the topic. First off, I obviously have my bias and preference towards voice and audio. I just think there's something special. I think there's a connection that people can make to brands, to other individuals, and just to the story and the story in general. Like, what's your feeling on this idea of just sound and voice?
Oh, it's so important. I mean, that's why I started the podcast in the first place, but it's part of what I do as well. What I do is I give a brand a voice and help them sound better to the people who are going to experience their brand. But it's bigger than just voice. The sound of their brand is super important, because that's what gives people the initial impression of who they are. It's their brand DNA. And it's in a really easy to digest and very quick format, because we get sound. We get the emotion behind sound really fast. So it's something that can be used on behalf of a company or a service, or, someone who wants to make a connection with an audience. And it's something that is really super important and really shouldn't be an afterthought.
Yeah, and so speaking of making that connection, lots of different ways to make a connection with an audience. So, some people say, and I'm not saying don't do any of these, by the way, but I mean, you could say, okay, well, write a compelling blog post, right? You could say, okay, well, you can, there's different ways to do marketing and to connect, but voice to me is just a little bit different. Like, to me, the way it resonates and what it does and the lasting effect. Like, I can still remember, radio commercials from when I was a kid. I can't remember necessarily a blog post that I read along. That's just my personal connection with it. Like, what's your impression for just the idea of voice and audio versus maybe some other formats? Again, not saying we don't do other formats, but what's your impression of what makes voice special?
I think it allows us to have a better connection. It allows us to hear the humanity in what we're listening to and relate a little easier. So probably the reason that you remembered those jingles is because of the music coupled with the voice, because we remember those tunes. I remember stuff from 20, 30 years ago myself. So yeah, they make a huge impression. And it's that audio template that particular brand and company decided to use that gives you your initial impression of who they are. And like I said, it happens really fast. And especially in music is very memorable for all of us. And it's one of those universal experiences as a human being, along with voice. because when you're talking to someone, you can tell whether they're being honest with you or not, right? It's really easy to get the tone of someone's voice. This is why things like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, this is why they're so popular, and why you can make such a deep connection with someone on those social audio platforms in a way that you can't really do on other social media. So I could know someone for years on Facebook, and the minute I have a conversation with them in Clubhouse, I know them way better than I ever have.
Oh, that's a great example, and those are great. And speaking of Clubhouse and podcasting, it seems to me like we're in this audio kind of revolution or renaissance, or I don't know what the right word is, but it seems like audio is in now. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely agree. Yeah, and I have Clubhouse discussions on a weekly basis. So it's one of those things where it is completely taken over at this point. And I really highly recommend that people pay attention to things like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, because it's a super interesting way to get to know people and to get to know different subject matters a lot more intimately. The weekly discussion that we have is Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I discuss all sorts of things having to do with the power of sound. That's kind of the point of my podcast as well. So we talk about all sorts of different things, anything to do with sound, and it's in there. I think tomorrow we have a discussion going on specifically for voiceover people about how you can be more professional to your clients. So there's all sorts of stuff there. I've talked about health in sound and how we can heal ourselves with sound. I've talked about storytelling and public speaking and all sorts of things. And podcasting as well. So there's all sorts of different topics. Sound is such a broad topic. It's just huge.
Tell us a little bit more about the podcast. You did mention that you're talking about, of course, branding and some other topics. So tell us a little bit more about the podcast, because I definitely love supporting other podcasters, number one, but I want my viewers to go check it out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's called the Audio Branding Podcast, and I do sort of subtitle it The Hidden Gem of Marketing, mostly because a lot of people, like we were talking about before, they don't really give audio its due, and they think of it as the last thing that they're doing in whatever production they're putting together. So, they worry so much about the picture, and then when it comes to the sound, they're like, oh, let's just go to a license-free music directory. And the problem with doing that is that your competitor can use the same music that you just used. So it's really hard for you to brand yourself and be different than a competitor, or from something completely different that is just using the same voice, or the same voice maybe, and the same music. It just, there's so much involved. So I talk about a lot of this whole power of sound thing on the podcast, both in how sound influences what we buy and also how it influences our daily lives, because it's, like I've been saying this whole time, it's super important. And it colors everything we do.
Absolutely. And so speaking of the branding portion of things, so a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of executives listen to this, and they're looking for, tips and tricks and ways to make themselves stick out. This is a new concept to me, an audio logo. Tell me a little bit more about that.
There are all sorts of companies that do this. One in particular is called Brand Music, Brand MUSIQ, and they make what are called mogos, which is really interesting. So it's basically
that's a cool name.
A mogo. So it's basically a music logo. They've done this for MasterCard, actually. So it's really a really quick way to get a good idea of what a brand sound is. And it's just a series of 5 notes, maybe. It could even be shorter than that. It could be a series of 3 notes. And I think they're making mini mogos as well, because those can be used for transactions or for notifications on a product, like your GE kettle is ready and has brewed its, it boiled its water, right? It's ready to go, like these kinds of things. And there's all sorts of ways to use these, but the brand, that sonic logo, which I guess it's also called a sonic logo, that is only one part of an audio brand. it's just it's just what you do with that logo. Like if you're looking at a visual logo, then it's the audio representation of that. But the entire company has a lot more to it than just that visual logo. They use a certain font, they use a certain color, and there's all sorts of ways to, quote, color with sound. So, yeah, it's one part, and it's an important part. It can certainly be an important part, but it's not the everything.
Of course. And I guess this is all, the idea here is that, to try to evoke that that customer emotion or that connection to enhance it even more.
Yeah, definitely. And it gives people an idea of who the usual audience for that brand might be and whether or not it's for you. Because if it resonates with you, then you'll want to deal with that company. And if it doesn't, well, that's marketing, right? Marketing doesn't just attract, it also repels. You have to know who your people are and who they aren't.
No, well said. And I'm thinking to myself, like how that would affect me. You hear it and you feel that connection. And you're like, okay, this is for me, and this is what people want in marketing. You don't want to necessarily be for everybody. You want to be for your segmented audience. So that's awesome. If there's somebody listening to this, and let's just say that they haven't really considered audio much. Let's just say that they're kind of, they have a business going, they're doing well, and they're thinking, okay, like how does audio fit into my spectrum or my world of business and marketing for my company? But maybe they haven't used audio much. Where should they start thinking about this, like, or going down that journey? Like, what are some things they should start considering?
Well, the very first thing, and probably the easiest thing that they can consider, is the music that they're using on whatever productions they're putting together. So if you go to a standard license-free music directory, yeah, you can find some nice stuff there. I am not saying that there isn't good stuff there. There totally is. But it isn't just yours. It can be used by anybody. So if you really want to make a brand for yourself that will stand out, I would really highly recommend that you get a musician to actually make you some kind of piece of music that you can use or modify across whatever medium you're using it for. So a 30-second ad, a 15-second ad, a longer video for your website that might be 3 minutes long. You're on hold, so whatever sound you're using on your on-hold telephone system. All sorts of different ways that you can do that. And if you own that music yourself, then rather than paying for a new piece of music every time you make something new, you can update that piece of music, or you can use that same piece of music. You've got your audio brand right there. And while it may need a bit more of an upfront cost, it will save you money in the end, having that available for you. It's kind of like having an intranet with all of your visual stuff out there so that whoever needs to use it can use it. It's just you have an audio set of things that people can use.
So let's change it up a bit, Jodi. So I want to go further into your business and what you offer. So Piece of Cake, Voiceovers, and Vocals. Tell us a little bit more about the company and what you offer.
Well, I am a voice actor, so that is what I do. Normally, I do projects that are less than 5 minutes of finished audio, and for the most part, that means that I'm doing commercials, corporate narration, explainer videos. I do the occasional TV narration and documentary work, which I really find enjoyable, so that's sort of an exception to my rule. But beyond that, I guess my voice ends up helping people sell their products, and I'm totally fine with that.
Oh, that's great. It's a great story, and you've been in this business for quite some time now, and I see that you, I just looked at your overall brand in general, and I'm like, okay, she is the voice. So I'm excited to have connected with you here today. And if somebody is listening to this, Jodi, and they want to learn more and they want to connect with you and your team to inquire about voice and also to follow your journey, meaning that your Clubhouse events and all your podcasts, all the other great things you have going, what's the best way for people to follow up? Well,
they can go to my website, which is voiceoversandvocals.com. They can visit the website for the podcast, which is at audiobrandingpodcast.com, or you can follow the Power of Sound Club on Clubhouse. We have rooms, as I was saying, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I also have a room on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern that I co-host with two voiceover friends of mine who also have podcasts. And we call it Voices in Podcasting, VIP. So we talk about voiceovers and we talk about podcasting and where they meet in the middle and individually.
Oh, that's awesome, and we'll put all that information in the show notes as well, so that
Sure.
Everybody can just click on it and just head right on over and check out your platforms and what you're up to. So, first off, Jodi, it's been great having you on the show today and learning more about your background and what you're up to in voice and voiceovers. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Hope you learned a lot, and hope you now understand a little bit more about why voice is so important to your marketing and branding efforts, and really just getting your message out there to the world. If this is your first time with the platform or listening to a Mission Matters episode, just so you know, we're a platform that's all about bringing on entrepreneurs, executives, and experts and having them share their mission, like why they do what they do, like what gets them excited and fired up to go out there into the marketplace and to really make a difference and to contribute. If that's the type of content and information you're into, then we definitely welcome you to hit that subscribe button, because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Jodi, really, it has been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.